Coca-Cola quietly entered Mexico in the early 20th century and never really left. It grew into something bigger than a drink, sponsoring local events, supplying corner shops, and flooding the airwaves with advertising until the brand felt like part of daily life. A local bottling company became its most powerful partner in the region, handling production and distribution across the country. By the time most Mexicans noticed how deep it had gone, it was already everywhere. In 1994, the same year, a major indigenous uprising shook the southern state. A large bottling facility opened in the highlands of Chiapas. It came with government permission to draw water from one of the region's most vital underground sources. That permit was quietly renewed a decade later without public debate. 2 industrial wells eventually went into the ground, and the extraction began on a scale the local community had never seen. The plant sat inside one of the most naturally water-rich regions in the country, yet the people living beside it were running dry. The government had granted permission to pull over 1 million liters of water from the ground every single day, at a price so low it barely registered as a cost. The deal was made in the capital, not with the communities whose water was being taken. While the company paid its fees to federal accounts, the local pipes crumbled and the taps ran dry. Indigenous families living just a few miles from the plant watched their wells shrink year by year until there was nothing left to draw. Community wells reached about 25 meters into the earth. The industrial ones went down 130 meters, pulling from far deeper in the same water source. When a deeper pipe drinks from the same ground, the shallower ones simply lose. Families were eventually walking 2 hours on foot just to reach clean drinking water. The damage was not only underground. In a separate town in the state of Tlaxcala, residents described thick black mud flowing out of a bottling plant and into their local river several days a week. The water their families had farmed and lived beside for generations was being used as an industrial drain. A fine was eventually issued, roughly $1 million, but critics noted the penalty changed very little on the ground. The company responded with a reforestation program. Over 129,000 trees planted across the region, alongside rainwater collection systems and community water storage. It claimed these efforts returned the same volume of water it had taken, but environmental scientists were clear. Water collected at the surface does not travel deep enough to refill an underground aquifer. The dry wells in affected communities told the same story the science did. Throughout the 2010s, ordinary people began pushing back. Environmentalists launched boycotts, citizens' organizations formed environmental monitoring caravans, and indigenous activists occupied bottling plants to draw attention to daily extraction that exceeded 1 million liters. A formal civil society report documented dozens of cases where corporate water use was being placed above the fundamental rights of citizens. The United Nations also released a report calling on the government to act. The government eventually moved to review how water extraction rights had been handed out to private companies. Proposals were made to stop those rights from being bought and sold between corporations. However, legal researchers warned that without strict enforcement, the new protections could quietly open the door to even more corporate access, if any extraction could be labeled as serving the public good. The language of reform, they cautioned, could be used against the people it was written for. The company has pledged to return at least 100% of the water it uses in production by 2030, and to extend clean water access to 3 million people by 2028. A multi-partner program launched in 2016 has already reached over 235,000 people across Latin America. New projects are targeting regions hit hardest by water scarcity and natural disaster. These are genuine commitments, and they sit alongside extraction numbers that have not stopped growing. The structural problem has not been solved. The capital city itself is now inching toward a point where piped water could stop flowing entirely, pushed there by industrial extraction, aquifer depletion, and a changing climate. In low-income communities, a bottle of cola still costs less than a bottle of clean water, and that equation has not changed. Thousands of people every year face severe medical consequences from a system that made sugar cheaper and more available than the water their bodies needed.